Hello everybody, I'm Nick, and in this video I'm going to show you how you can manage Azure Blob Storage in your .NET Core application. Azure Blob Storage is a service for storing large amounts of unstructured object data such as text or binary data, and you can use it to expose that data publicly to the world or privately in your application. Common usages include serving images or documents directly to the browser, storing files for distributed access, streaming video and audio, storing data for backup or restore or even disaster recovery, or storing data for further data analysis. It's one of those services that are widely used in Azure, and you should definitely know how to deal with it in your C# code. This video will touch uploading, creating content, listing, and deleting in C#. This video is part of my Azure series. If you don't want to miss any episode, please subscribe and ring the same notification bell to get notified when I upload a new video. Now let's look at the code. What I have here is I've made a small API here which has a single controller, the Blob Explorer controller, and this controller doesn't actually do much. All it does is it injects an iBlob service here, and then we have a few endpoints. One gets a blob by blob name, and whenever I refer to blob, remember it's just a file essentially. So we can get a blob using the blob name, we can list all the blobs, we can upload a file as a blob, or we can upload content, which is a string essentially, as a blob, and then we can delete by name. This is what this API can do, all the basic, CRUD functionality that you'd expect an API to do. Now, if you actually see in my services, I don't have an implementation of this interface anywhere. So we will implement this interface from scratch, and I'm not referring to Blob Storage anywhere yet, so we're starting from scratch. So the first thing you want to do is you want to go to the dependencies and you want to manage NuGet packages, and you want to look for the Azure.storage.blobs package, and this is the new v12 blob storage package. I'm gonna go ahead and add it, and this will allow us to connect to Azure Blob Storage. Now before we can connect to one, we need to have one. So what I have here is I create a resource group called Blob Storage EUN, and then I'm gonna go ahead and create an account, the Blob Storage account. So you want to go to add, and you can go to storage down here, and then it's this storage account, blob file, table, and queue. A storage account is a general thing, but it supports many types of storage within it. Let's give it a name. Let's call it NCYTEUN, and it all has to be lowercase, no hyphens, no nothing. It is in North Europe because my resource group is in North Europe. I won't quite explain all the nitty-gritties of Blob Storage currently because I'm planning to do a video just for Blob Storage without any code, just explaining the service. We're just gonna go with the standard performance. We're gonna choose Storage v2. Don't go for this Blob Storage, this is a legacy one. You're gonna go with Storage v2, and I'm gonna go with hot access tier. Hot means that my data is accessed regularly, which is what this app probably represents. If you don't, you can go with cool, but I recommend hot if you actively use that data. And then I'm gonna go with local redundant storage here, LRS, which even that gives me 11 nines if I'm correct. And then zone, I think, gives me 12. So it's very highly available. You will not lose that data. So let's go ahead and create that. Let's review the plan, and I'm gonna push it. And while I'm waiting for this to complete, let me just explain that every account, the storage account, allows you to have something called a container. And this is not to be confused with Docker. It's not where our application runs. It's where our data is stored. And you can see containers as logical separation of your data. For example, if I'm storing movies in one container, I will store my images in another, and so on and so forth. So this is how the storage account view looks like, and I'm gonna go with the container button here, and I'm gonna say new container, and I'm gonna just name it YouTube. And I'm not gonna allow any public access. I'm gonna go with private. You can go with blob level read-only public access or container level read-only public access, but I'm gonna go with private because I don't want anybody to see that data. And I'm gonna click OK, and this will make my container. And now I'm going to use this container to push data in it. Now we will programmatically upload, but let me just show you how you can do it from the interface as well. And you click the upload button, and you see this pop up here, and you click files, And I'm gonna select one of my thumbnails. Let's go with this one. And I'm gonna say override if file already exists and upload. And this very quickly uploads it in Blob Storage. And then you can click on it and you can preview it and you can see that the file has been uploaded. And you can also download it and a few other things. Now, before we go back to the code, I'm gonna get the last thing that I need. And this is the key to access the data. So I'm gonna go to the account level. Let's click go to resource. And I'm gonna go to access keys. And I'm gonna use the connection string. Of course, there's many ways to connect to Azure Blob Storage. In this particular example, I'm gonna use the connection string, but you can use whatever you see fit. And I'm gonna explain all the other versions in the Azure Blob Storage video. So back to my code, I'm gonna go to the app settings.json and I'm gonna say Azure Blob Storage connection string. And I'm just gonna paste that string here. So with that out of the way, we can go to the startup.cs and do the registration that we need to do. And there is one thing that we need to register, and it's called Blob Service Client. So I'm gonna say services.add singleton, and you wanna register this as a singleton. You don't wanna be newing it up every time. And I'm gonna say new Blob Service Client. And what it needs in here is the connection string. So I'm gonna use the configuration and I'm gonna get value string by name, and the name is the one we gave in the settings. So we have our client registration, and this is what we will inject to allow us to essentially connect to Blob Storage. Now the next thing we need to register is the actual service that we will use, which is essentially an abstraction over this client, because it will be very hard to mock and use this in your unit tests. So instead I made an interface called iBlob service, and the implementation doesn't exist yet. So we will create it now, as you can see, but this is how you register it. And I'm gonna create a new class called Blob Service. I'm gonna do iBlob Service, so implement that interface and add the missing members. So these are all the unimplemented members. And this Blob Service will have a private read-only Blob Service client injected to it. And we're gonna inject it through the constructor. And now we will use that to implement these methods. So let's start with how we can get a blob. So we're gonna implement the get blob async. Now, the first thing you need whenever you're accessing anything in the container is you need to get the container client, which is a reference to the container that you're about to access. So I'm gonna say var container client equals blob service client, and then get blob container client. And we need the name of the container that we're about to access. If I go back to the browser, you can see that we named the container. Let me just find it again. We named it YouTube. So I'm gonna copy the name YouTube and I'm gonna paste it here. And this will now allow me to access data in that container. And in fact, let's just start by accessing this part1.png to test it. So in order to implement that, I'm gonna say what I need now is a blob client, and in order to get that blob client, I need to use the container client dot get blob client, and what goes in here is the name of the file that I want to access, the name of the blob that I want to access. And to return the data, I simply do return await blob client dot download async, and I can't use await, I need to do this async. And the reason why this says that it cannot return is because this is returning a blob download info. So let me just say var blob download info equals that, not blon, and then return new blob info. And the two things I need is a stream of the content and the content type. So blob download info dot value dot content is the stream, and then blob download info dot value dot content type is the content type. And this should be enough to download the blob and serve it back through the API. And in order to test that, I'm gonna go ahead and run this API, and I'm gonna use Postman to get that image. So the name was part1.png, and as you can see, I have Postman here, and all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go to blobs /part1.png and do send, and this will preview the image for me because it knows it's an image. In fact, if I copy that and I go to the browser and I create a new tab and I paste that, you can see that the image is loaded up. So that's great. It means it's working. We can get data back from the Blob Storage account or the container. So let me go ahead and stop it. So this was simple enough. Now let's see how we can actually list all the blobs in a container. And something I should mention is it's a bad idea to hard code strings like this, because what if the container name changed, the whole class is obsolete. Now you would either inject that through the constructor or make it a parameter in this method and every other method, but for simplicity reasons and for this video, I'm going to just hard code it. Of course, you can find the full code in the description down below as always. So in order to list all the blobs, I need again a container client. So I'm going to copy the same container client in here, and I will need to turn this into an async method again. And now I want to create an items list, which is a new list of type string, just an empty list. And then I'm going to say await for each. This is a C#8 feature, which allows us to iterate asynchronously something that is essentially streamable. And I'm going to say blob item in container client dot get blobs async. And then for each item, items dot add blob item dot name. And now I have a list of all the names in the container, of all the blob names, and now I'm simply going to return that. And that's how I implemented the second method, which is the list blobs method. And if I run this application, let's see how it looks in Postman. So in order to get that, I need to, I'm just creating a new tab. I need to do blobs /list. And as you can see, part1 is in fact the only item in this container, and this array returns that. So great, that's how we now list items from the blob storage container. Let's go to the next method, and this is a bit of a more tricky one because we actually need to upload a file from our drive. What I have here is a bunch of thumbnails that I create for the series, and we're gonna try to upload another one, maybe the part 4, I don't know. Let's pick one in random. And what this will need, let's actually take a look at the model, is it will need to have the upload file request model. And this contains a file path and a file name. The file path is the full path of the file in my drive. I won't be making an interface that allows you to upload it because this will overcomplicate the thing, but just so you know, you can use a path or you can use an in-memory stream to do that, and both ways are supported from the client. The other thing is the file name, and this file name is what I want this to be named in Blob Storage. So let's go to Postman. I have a post request to that URL. In fact, let me check what the actual URL is. It's upload file. So if I copy that and I paste it here, this should allow me to call that endpoint. And what I want this to look like from a calling standpoint is I'm going to name this thumb.png in the container, but the path I'm going to get from the full path on my drive, and that is that one here. And I'm going to paste, and I'll have to escape the backslashes. And then I'm going to upload the part4.png. And when I hit that, assuming I implemented that method, I will be able to upload that thumbnail in the container. So let's see how we can do that. Let's implement that method. And you'll see that it's very, very simple. The first thing you need to do, again, as always, is you need a reference to the container client. And in fact, some of you might say that, why don't you just inject the container client here instead of the service client? Yes, you could also do that if you're only targeting one container. I just wanted to make this generic enough so you can understand how you can change that to talk to something else. So we have that here. And what we need to do now in order to upload is we need to say var blob client. So again, we get a blob client to the get blob client of file name that we specified. But you might say, wait, how did you get a blob client of something that doesn't exist yet? Well, that's how it works. You essentially get a reference to that blob that even if it doesn't exist, you still have a reference to, and you can do whatever you want with it. You can upload to it, you can delete it, you can get it. It's up to you. And what we want to do is we want to upload something. So we're going to say await blob client. In fact, I should actually stop this application and turn this into an async call. So blob client dot upload async. And first, you can have a stream here, you can have a path, it's up to you. A stream is mostly used for something that's in memory, a path is for something that you want to load from your local drive. I'm going to show you how to do it with path, but I'm also going to show you how to do it with a stream in a second, so don't worry about that. And I'm going to say file path, not file name, file path, which I get again from the user. And I need to specify also the content type, because if I don't, Blob Storage won't do any data analysis and will just think that it's just a byte array essentially. So for that reason, I'm going to say new blob HTTP headers, and I'm going to specify the content type to be equal to, I'm going to get the file path, and I have an extension method called get content type. And this extension method, if I just F12 into it, it will try to use the file extension content type provider that's built in .NET Core, and we'll try to find the content type based on the extension. If it's not something recognizable, it will just use the default one. So again, that code is in the description. You can find it if you want to use it. And in order to upload it, that's it. You don't actually need to do anything else. So let's take a look at that and let's see how it works. So back in Postman, like I said, this is the file I want to upload. This is the path to it. So I'm going to click send, and I'm getting OK back, which is good. So if I go back to the container and I refresh, I can now see thumb.png here. And if I go to edit, you can see that the right thing is uploaded. It's the benchmarking video. So this is how you simply upload, and you can see that the content type is also the right one, which is great. So let's just close that and let's go back to the code. The next thing that we want to do is we want to be able to upload content from in memory, essentially a stream. And of course, Blob Storage is not just about an image or a video. For example, if you have a login service that periodically pushes logs into Blob Storage, those logs might look like a string, for example. I'm going to use a JSON file for this example, and I'm going to create this JSON file in memory. And let me just show you how I can do that. I have a model here called upload content request, and this content will be provided by the API from Postman, and it will create a file with the name that I provide to save in Blob Storage. And we're going to be able to retrieve it as well. So let's go back to Blob Storage. And in here, I'm going to get, you guessed it, two references, a container client reference and a blob client reference. So box standard. Yes, a lot of repetition. You could extract it. I want to keep it self-contained. And what I need to do now is convert this string into a stream. And not to do that, I need to convert it into a byte array first. So I'm going to say var bytes equals encoding dot utf8 dot get bytes of the content, and then var memory stream equals new memory stream, and in the constructor I'm going to put the bytes that I want the stream to contain. And something else I can do is I can use the using tag, not like this, just like this, and this will know to clear the stream once it's out of context. It's just a new C# feature. And what you need to do here is you need to say blob client dot upload. Actually, I need to say await first. Dot blob client dot upload async. I use the memory stream, and then again I'm gonna use the content type, but this time I don't have a file path to get the type from, so I'm gonna use the file name and hope that this actually makes sense. And again, I need to change this to async, and change this to async using, and change this to await using as well. And this should be enough to upload the file. So let's see. So application is running. I'm back in Postman. I'm gonna create a new tab, and I'm gonna change the upload file to upload content, which is the name of the endpoint, and I'm gonna copy that as it is. So the body, change it to JSON, and instead of file path is content, and in here I'm gonna content, yeah, that's more like it. And in here I'm gonna paste some JSON, that I'm gonna handwrite. So like test, does it work? And I need to escape the double quotes. So let's just use backslashes for that. And I'm gonna call this example.json. And I'm gonna click send. Oops, at the typo, this is upload content, not upload content. So I'm gonna send that. It says okay. So now we can go to the get endpoint, and instead of part 1, I'm gonna say example.json. So let's paste that here. And as you can see, it works fine. It has the right headers and the visualization is correct. It knows it's an application JSON because it got the type from the extension and it returns it fine. So this is how you upload something that is created in memory, essentially, in Blob Storage. The last thing that I need to show you is, of course, how to delete something. And in order to delete, you guessed it, we're gonna get 2 references, the container and the blob client. And I'm gonna use the blob name here. And that's how you essentially find the reference. You use the blob name and then you say, of course, let me just turn this into an async. And I say await blob client dot delete if exists async. And that's it. Actually, you don't actually need to do anything else. This is it. And let's just run this in order to test it. So back to Postman, I'm gonna delete the example.json. I'm gonna use the HTTP delete. So blobs, what's exactly the name? Oh, the blob name, that's it. Okay, cool. So just paste that and send. And it says okay. So if I go to the container and I refresh, you see nothing, and that's because it doesn't exist. I deleted it. And in fact, let me just delete that as well. The thumbnail back here, paste it, deleted, boom, it's gone. I can keep sending it. It's idempotent, so you won't exactly know. So it's gone. And if I refresh, you'll see that it's no longer there. Something else I should note is, let me just go back to the content one. If I go ahead and create this JSON file again, and as you can see here, it exists. I can change something, put some data and send it again. And if I retrieve it, it's now updated. That's because creating and updating works in an absurd fashion. So if something exists by default, it will override it. So be careful with that. That's all I had for you for this video. Thank you very much for watching. Special thanks to my GitHub sponsors for making these videos possible. If you want to support me as well, you're going to find the link in the description down below. Leave a like if you liked this video, subscribe for more content like this, and ring the bell as well in order to get notified when I upload a new episode. And I'll see you in the next video. Keep coding.